If you were ever to embody the role of First Lady or a position of power, how would you approach it? Would you approach this position to help people and to stand up for what was right? Or would you approach this position to boost yourself? Would you use this to gain popularity or to put yourself more out there? Well, if you were to ever gain this position of power, I would hope that you would imitate Eleanor Roosevelt. Throughout the 1930s, Eleanor Roosevelt was a women's activist and she stood up for women's rights. While researching Eleanor Roosevelt and being in the History of 2112 class, I came to know that Eleanor wasn't just a president's wife. She was a member of good things. She was helping women and she was pushing for the rights that she knew that women should have. In the time I have with you in this speech, I'm going to tell you about Eleanor Roosevelt and her approach to power. Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the most powerful and impactful women in the 1930s. She impacted so many women's lives and made a difference for many. According to Eleanor Roosevelt, Women in the New Deal, Eleanor was one of the most foremost members of the community. In the picture on the side, you can see Eleanor Roosevelt at one of her conferences that she held. In these conferences, Eleanor Roosevelt would hear out women. She would hear what the women had to say, what they were going through, and what was being unheard by many. Throughout the Great Depression, women had little to no rights. The women were stuck in their homes cleaning and cooking and tending to their kids while they were just being unheard and overlooked. However, that all changed in 1930 when Eleanor Roosevelt stood up for it. Eleanor Roosevelt was more than just a president's wife. She was an activist and she was making change. She was pushing for things to come true and for things to come to light. Women throughout the Great Depression were overlooked and overheard. They had nothing really. They couldn't even go to work. They couldn't make their own money, and they had to rely on everybody else to do it. When Eleanor's husband, FDR, became president, he was fighting through the Great Depression. He was trying to make the United States a whole again. He was trying to bring back the United States. However, while FDR had his New Deal, he was bringing justice for African Americans and for Americans, but he was forgetting about many. And that's when Eleanor Roosevelt had to do her duty of a good person to make a change. While FDR was a determined man, he also had an even more advocate and determined woman behind him who was making change and a difference for others. Not only did Eleanor hold conferences, but she also had many speeches where she was changing lives and making detrimental impacts on people. Eleanor Roosevelt also had a book called It's Up to the Women, where she stated that if women wanted to make a difference, they had to come together and make a change. They had to stand up. Eleanor wasn't for the violent protests. She was very nonviolent, and she just wanted a difference. She wanted people to come together, not separate. As this speech comes to an end, I hope that you find yourself in a position of power and you're able to imitate Eleanor Roosevelt. I hope that you take the right advantage of a position of power and not the wrong. I hope that you don't boost yourself or push for something that you know isn't right. I hope you make a difference. I spoke with you today about Eleanor Roosevelt and how she just wasn't the president's wife. She was an activist and was impactful to many people. What would you do if you were in this position? If you were in a position of power, how would you take advantage of it? Would you take advantage of it in the right way, Or would you take advantage of it in the wrong way?